some about tonight, because I definitely have radical roots, and people keep saying, what are you doing as a dean? It's somebody's dean. So I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about and what that means. But I do these things in all unconventional ways. He is right. I am a creative spirit. And stepping into academia, I was disruptive from the very beginning. And thank goodness I landed at LSU in the curriculum theory project, where I was embraced for my disruptiveness. It wasn't always easy, right? But we were a family. And me inviting students into my home, that's because that's the way I was reared intellectually at LSU. We went to our professor's home. We ate food together. We learned English together. I can remember Hung Yu. She was in my cohort, and Hung Yu she barely spoke English, but she would sit in class and we would patiently wait for her participation, she was making sense of this. And then we would listen for, what sense is this, like, what is she bringing here from China to help us make sense of what's happening? And so it was a family, and I feel so much deep gratitude for that. And never, ever in a million trillion years would I expect to find that in Bible Belt Museum. Never. I don't even think I was going to grad school to study race. But you can't, it was in me. And then I find myself in this place where it was again, meant to be. And this will be a whole sort of theme in my talk tonight. But I want to get us started. Y'all got to get up. I want you to move a little bit, but also meditate on these words. Okay. Oh, I'm telling you, Black people, If you go to Black People Family Reunion, always hear Frankie Beverly and Queen. Right? The whole anthology in the end. But this song, I thought, this is what I want to talk about today. Every day, I have to get up and inspire myself, right? Check myself, to go out and continue to struggle, because the struggle is real, especially right now. And so I get up every morning with something like this. It's not always Frankie Beverly and Mays, but I thought this was appropriate for the talk today. And what is he saying? Love is the key. Do y'all know that? Do you know that? Then how come we act like we don't know that? Right? We act like we don't know that. Like we're lost, actually, in the logic of lovelessness. So many layers of lovelessness, that we have to learn love. Again, we got to get to this core thing. I think Hong, you set me up so nice last night, because she talked about dancing, right? She talked about dancing in the starlights. But also, the last thing she said was nonviolence was a radical form of love. And as I go in and listen to the sessions, it's all love. The keynote this morning, this is love, right? Nonviolence is a radical act of love. Abolition is a radical act of love. We can always go back to Paulo Freire and liberatory pedagogy. It's us always trying to embrace and to understand this thing called love. But as academics, we have a hard time with this. We don't talk about love, right? Well, some of us do. The Black feminists do. The Black feminists talk about love. The artists might talk about love. But I think in academia as a whole, we have built a whole institution on a kind of scientific rationality that has said feelings need to be suppressed and controlled in order for us to think clearly, in order for us to think intellectually. And all of my work has been resisting that idea, because I believe that feelings is actually the one language that all human beings speak, right? I may not know what it is like, to sit in my graduate school classroom and, new to the country and not understand the language. But I've had an experience, right, where I can understand what it feels like to feel out of place, or what it feels like to not belong. We all have those experiences, and yet those are the things that we're suppressing. And it creates a disconnection and an inability, to even enrich our intellectual thought, right? Because we can't really do it outside of our emotions. We irrationally believe that we are rational beings. We are not, largely. We are always trying to be rational, right? But we're not necessarily just rational beings. And so for my entire body of work has really been thinking about this concept of love in many different ways. And for all of us, I like to talk, I like to do my talks, I like to tell my story, because people are trying to figure out their thing. I don't want to say my thing is the thing, but I want to tell you how I'm connecting intimately and figuring my way on the journey, right? How I am evolving as a scholar, as an intellectual, as an activist, as a mother, as a person, on this journey to become more human beings, as Grace Lee Boggs would say. And I think that's important because anything else that I do gets positioned as the right answer. And I'm not offering a right answer. I'm offering a contribution to what we like to say in the Curriculum Theory Project is a complicated conversation, you know, about how we exist here together. And so, you know, I'll tell a few stories about my journey, and then I want to talk about the work that I find myself doing right now. And everybody's, you know, shocked at my accepting a dean position and what it means to accept a dean position, you know, and, you know, sort of having this very, and I tell you, very disruptive. You know, I didn't want to write like they told me how to write. I didn't go to a conference and do a presentation like they told me how to do a presentation. I did it, you know, my way. And I would say what I've been trying to do is to bring a different, not just different words, but a different aesthetic to the struggle that we're all engaged in at different frequencies of the same sort of complicated struggle, right? And so my first story is about Cece. I call it Cece in the African Medallion. And I'm telling this story because this is the story that it taught me a lesson about my own upbringing, right? I grew up in Detroit, in the city, to grandparents who were labor and civil rights activists, and to then my father and his brothers and sisters who were Black Power, Pan-African, Republic of New Africa, you know, comrades, revolutionaries, community activists. And I grew up Catholic. I know, it's a lot. It's a lot even for me to think about it. But every time we show up at church with the djembe drums and the dashikis, Father Thomas just goes, those are the Taliaferros. But so I have this sort of background, and I don't think growing up, I understood it as a gift. I understood it as, oh my God, my family is just so radical. Like I need to get away. I need to break out and see what else is what else in the world. And I did do that. I went 3,000 miles away from home to go to college on a whim. I didn't have a plan. I had an acceptance letter. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any tuition. I didn't have any place to live. But I told those people I wasn't going home till I get what I came for. And what I ran into in my time at UCLA, again, brought me back to my roots. And one of the things that I did is I got hired as a sophomore in college to work in LA as a paraprofessional in LA Unified School District. And in the context I was in, I ended up really teaching for a lot of complicated reasons. But I want to tell you about my third graders. I want to tell you about Cece. So Cece is a little brown chocolate girl with, you know, lots of kinky hair that just refused to stay in the rubber bands, you know, and she was sassy, precocious. And that got her in trouble a lot of times with her teachers and a lot of times even with the other kids. And then there's her nemesis, Eugene. Eugene loved to drive Cece crazy, right? And so always on playground duty, these two would always come running up to me with some problem, some conflict to solve. So for instance, one day, Cece comes stomping up and she's like, Miss Denise, would you tell Eugene that I am not a virgin? He keeps calling me a virgin. I am a Baptist. Right? And Eugene would just laugh and he would just harass her so bad. And then one day, it was hot. Like I remember this day so clear. It was hot. The sun was beating down. The playground was just black tar. And you know how when the sun is beating down on the tar, you can see waves of heat coming up. And I was standing there thinking like, I can't wait till recess is over. And then I hear my name, that's Denise, that's Denise. And I could see her marching across the yard and Eugene right behind her. And you know, she comes up to me and she was, this is the 80s. So she's wearing one of those leather African medallions, right? And she comes marching up and she said, Miss Denise, could you tell Eugene that this is not Africa, that this is California? And I said, and you know, Eugene's rolling, laughing, you know, like, oh my God. And so I say, well, Cece, I said, actually, Eugene is right. This is Africa and not California. And she's like, well, if this is like, why is everybody wearing Africa when we live in California? This doesn't make sense. So I talked to her a little bit. I talked to her a little bit about the medallion and what the colors meant. And I said, well, we're going to talk about this in the classroom, right? We'll take this up in the class. And we did. And I introduced the children to county colors, what is Africa to me? And the conversation was amazing and broke my heart, right? Like, because where it went is, how come people don't see us? They said, do Black people, don't we use shampoo? And I was like, yeah, well, like, how come we're not in any of the shampoo commercials? Like, this is where this conversation went. And so I had some, this school was probably 60% African-American, 40% Spanish speaking, mostly Chicano, but then we had a lot of new immigrants in the school in those first years, which is part of how I end up in the role that I do. But so we decide we're gonna do some research, and then we're gonna write a play about African origins. And so we do. And then we're gonna put this play on for the whole school. And so I'm very, like, I'm creative, but I'm not about like, we're gonna do a good show, right? We're not gonna do the show where you're holding the paper and you're reading and you're looking up. We're gonna do a good show here, right? And I'm all about sort of, building the show with them improvisationally, right? And then we just do it again and again until we're comfortable with it. And so I wanted them to try out for parts. So there's a line, Cece tries out, and she goes, I am the most beautiful, powerful Cleopatra. And she nailed it, right? Like, all that sass, she just packed it in there. I was like, go girl, that's gonna be her part. Next little girl tries out, she's light skinned, long hair. And she comes up and she says, I am the most beautiful, powerful. She's really quiet and shy. And I was like, okay, this is not gonna work. This is Cece's role. So the teacher I was working with, though, and so I give the role to Cece. The teacher I was working with, she was very concerned. She was like, I really don't know if Cece should have that role. She says, because I think the kids are not gonna be accepting of her in that role. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, that was my thought. That's just ridiculous. So I charge forward. Come to the day of the play, all the school is in the auditorium. Cece's on the stage, and she does her line. I am the beautiful, most powerful Cleopatra. And the kids break out laughing. Cece runs off the stage and she's in tears. And I go and I spend the next probably hour or so with her, trying to remind her of how beautiful she is and how magnificent she is. And sometimes, the children don't know that. And so after the words in the teacher's lounge, we stem up this whole conversation.
about whether it's good to teach children about their Blackness or not, about loving their Blackness, not just about their Blackness, right? Like in my family, loving Blackness was just a metaphor for loving ourselves, right? And it's the way we captured it. And so I was, of course, arguing like, of course we should, because every Black person knows, and every person living on the underside of any kind of oppression knows you're going to have that moment, right? That moment where you go, oh, where you're actually catch yourself being adversive to yourself, right? And so I was like, that's what I'm trying to ward off, right? And the teachers, I had to think a lot. I was like, well, did the kids laugh? You know, for the reasons that the teacher was worried about? Or was there something else? Or you know, most of these teachers in the lounge were teachers of color, debating about whether this was a good idea or not, because they felt like it would prevent the children from, you know, embracing the multicultural melting pot that was the Los Angeles landscape and all of that problematic stuff in there. And so I said, you know, so this thing sort of sticks with me, because I think with Cece, did my hug help Cece let that go, or did this moment grow up in her like a tree with many crooked branches, right? And some sort of centripetal force, right? That brings all of this sort of constantly back into her sphere and the question of herself, right? Her self-regard. And this is in the backdrop of a school where even the curriculum on the playground around Blackness was problematic, right? Like, it was nothing to hear children call each other, you Black so-and-so, or, you know, constantly using it in, you know, sort of pejorative ways. And so, and for me, it was constantly sort of pulling them in and trying to show them what they could be and how they were falling into a certain kind of detrimental pattern of being. And so for me, Cece's story was critical. First, I thought, oh my gosh, like, to me, when I did what I did, it was a natural course of events. I didn't even think I was challenging anything necessarily. I just thought, oh, here is a void, let me step in it and fill it, right? Because I see it, right? I see what's happening. And then I think, how did I know to do that? Because I had the gift of my own family. You know, I could come home from school with all kinds of stories about Columbus discovering America or whatever. And somebody would say, hell no, sit down. Let me tell you, that's, and then they would tell me at the end of it though, which you still got to get it back. Right? And so it was still on me at a very young age, trying to figure out the knowledge thing. And trying to figure out for me really in the ways in which the knowledge production creates the lovelessness in the way that it is happening. But the other thing for me, I think that was a moment of realization, is that we have lots of expectations of what should happen in school, what should be happening for our children. And what I know is that school is not big enough, strong enough, or bad enough to love Black children in the way that they need to be loved in a profoundly anti-Black society. And I can say that about Black children, and because of the way I've been inside of it, and that's not to say it's not true in other ways. Like Achille Mbembe talks about the becoming Black of the world. It is the way in which Blackness, and the way in which we are Blacking the world in the negative, right? And associating Blackness, not just with substandard everything, right? How we're at the top of every bad list and at the bottom of every good list. But the ways in which it's associated with a constant gratuitous violence, a spiritual, psychological violence, and over again. And so my work has been like, how do I get into the sinews of that? Right? And it's interesting because you catch yourself tangled in it. And even when you know what the project is that you're trying to undo yourself from, you're in it in a way that you cannot completely undo yourself from, right? And so that, to me, for me, that's where my work with Carrere, or Carrere, I like to say Carrere, I don't know if that's the Black way to say it or not, but is the constant, or I think Han Yu, when she talked about our shadow work, that is the work that we all have to constantly sort of be constantly be doing as we try to really radically rethink not our relations to ourselves, but our relations, and we can't rethink our relations to each other without first and foremost rethinking our relation to ourselves. And I say that really very strongly, and especially that's what the Black feminists, I think have stood on strongly and have taught me, is that we have to be on this journey of self-love to be able to. Bell Hooks says it so clearly. If you're not engaged in self-actualization, how do you go in the classroom and be nonviolent, right? And teach children through practices of love and not fear, and not hyper standardization, and not retribution, and not labeling, and kind of all these ways we perpetuate, right? And so I show up to grad school, and I find these cool people, the curriculum theory project people, thank goodness, because I don't think, like in the semester or two before I did, I thought I was going to grad school to study something about classroom engagement. But because I'm constantly trying to move from these I'm trying to get enough distance from my roots to try to see what else is possible. But what I end up seeing is how much of a gift, right, those roots are in a real kind of way. And so I attach very quickly to Bell Hooks. I think I first read her in Petra Monroe's class. I think Teaching to Transgress had just come out the year that I started graduate school. And Teaching to Transgress was amazing, but it wasn't enough. Like I went back and found all of Bell Hooks' work, but most especially her work around loving Blackness. And I think my work has been trying to iterate the imperative of loving Blackness as a pedagogical imperative in an anti-Black, anti-human world, right? And not in the way, like I think it's really important that we step into our very specific stories, and then we step out to see where the difference makes the difference in how we learn how to connect to each other. Valerie Coward, a Sikh activist, has a saying that I love, that you are the part of me that I do not yet know, right? And if we're grounded in that idea, it is stepping deeply into our stories and then being able to step out to see, where the generativity and where the connection and where the humanness is across all of those sort of differences, right? Because it's a constant work of like unlearning lovelessness. It's so steeped in everything that we do. Every day I have to get up and practice not doing it, right? Not investing in it, not giving over to it. And so in graduate school, it was what I was learning in graduate school was that, oh my God, the whole operation is jacked up, right? Like, it's such a complex thing, right? Because you're having the opportunity to come and think about, it's giving you a space to come and think about all of this. And that was amazingly empowering. And yet, every page I turned, I'm like, oh my God. We have built the whole operation against ourselves. And you can see different iterations of it. I like to do my work at the intersection of curriculum studies and Black studies, because those are the questions that have really driven me in my life. Can our Black people love a bow? Can Black people be loved? Can Blackness be loved in a way that's not consumptive? You know, those are the questions that I have been asking myself. And what's coming out of it is a broader understanding of love power, right? In all the ways in which it is, we miss the opportunities to nurture it and engage it. And so I think there's so many things inside of higher education that I struggled with. And writing was the first. And how we show up. I started with the dancing and the music because, again, if I'm going back to my roots, I'm telling you, the way we got political education is we had a birthday party for Marcus Garvey. And we had food, and we had music, and we got that political education slipped up in there along the way. And that's, if you look at the Black arts, Black studies, Black power, women's, you know, Native American movements, all of these movements in this time, it is about being beyond the intellectual sort of confines of Western thought. It's about how do we do this in the way that we know how to do this. And even if we looked at Stacey Abrams and the way, how did she get Black folks, Asian folks, Latino folks to go to the polls? There was music, there was food, there was dancing involved. And so to me, this, in academia, we get so disembodied from the struggle. Like, we're thinking about it all the time. We're writing about it intellectually and almost in the abstract. But what are we doing when we get up every single morning? What are we doing when we commit to writing in a certain way or not, right? Like, I think I went to AERA in costume, full on regalia, and performed when nobody was doing that at AERA. The furthest they had gotten was Reader's Theater. Right? And I remember sitting in that room and it was packed. And it was remarkable because I think we were up against like some panel with Pinar, Apple, you know, the people. And that room was packed. And when we got finished, people were like in the room together, connected, and this really messy, difficult sort of conversations, but inspired and hopeful. And I thought, oh my God, like, I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. And I tried to again. I'm gonna do this for the rest of I'm like, this is the thing. I was having a conversation with a colleague that it just struck me how different we were in these spaces. We were talking about storytelling, and he was making the point I love this colleague. I respect him a great deal and love the work that he does. But we don't share thinking, and we can't, because we're very different people, right? He's an old white guy. And so he says, well, my problem with the storytelling has always been like, okay, so what do you do next? I'm not gonna argue with you because that's your experience. And I was like, oh, of course not, right? Like, but what his comment said to me is like, this engagement for you is about argument. It's about, an intellectual engagement in a certain kind of way. And I was thinking, well, that's not what it's about for me. It's about surviving. It's about getting to the next place. This is about how do we become more human beings. Like, this is about how we get in it every day and do the work on ourselves. If you're doing the work anywhere else, you got to be doing the work. If you're not doing the work on yourself, you're not doing anything else. You can't be doing anything else because you can't change anybody else. We keep talking about, I love my sociology folks. The systems, the structures, they're real. They're real, but we built them and we invest them with life. And then we act like we don't know we did that. Like they just came up from somewhere and we caught. We did it. And we got to undo. For the sake of the whole world, we got to undo. And so what does undoing it look like? Right? And for me, it's been challenging the norms. Right? And it's always tricky. Just all my friends are like, what the hell? You somebody's deep. And I'm like, yeah, Detroit Wayne State is an interesting university. Detroit is an interesting moment in its trajectory. And for whatever reason, I look, trust me, I was at Miami of Ohio for 21 years. Moving, well, I was gonna move one day. Cincinnati wasn't much too conservative for my taste. But right, I had a daughter who just started high school, a son who just went off to college. Like, I got this 21 years in, and then this job comes along and I ignore it. First of all, it was strange. They sent me I get this email that says, wouldn't you love to work at this wonderful place that has this going on and that going on and this going on? And I'm like, wow. And then they never say what the place is. Like, this is a joke. So I dumped the email and it came again. And I dumped it again. And it came again. And finally I was like, I just want to know what this place is. So I emailed the recruiter back. I was like, what is this place? And she was like, oh, it's Wayne State University. They haven't officially released their job announcement yet. So I guess this is the new thing in academic searches, teasers. So I was like, oh, okay, and I sort of just going about my business. And I show up at AESA and the Wayne State folks were like, we got a dean position coming out, you need to apply for it. And I was like, oh no, yeah, it's not a good time for me. And I'm not a very ambitious person. I move on inspiration. If I am called, I will go. If I am not, I will not. Remember, I've been at Miami of Ohio in a conservative Cincinnati for 21 years, waiting on a call. And so I was talking to a group, it was a doctoral student actually, I was making this very big deal about, I gotta be called, I need a straight line. I need no reason to say no, just to throw my hat in the ring, because I don't play. Like, I'm not just wandering around looking for a job, right? Like, if I have to be compelled to do it. And so I'm making a big deal. I'm like, I need a straight line. I need a straight line. And so one of the doctoral students said, well, Dr. D, you live in Cincinnati, right? I said, yeah. He said, I do believe that is one straight shot up 75 to Detroit. And I was like, well, indeed it is. And I get back to my desk Monday morning, and the first thing in my inbox is this recruiter email. Just checking one more time. And I was like, damn. So I called her up and I was like, well, I'm thinking maybe. She was like, okay, just send me your vita right now because the search committee is getting ready to meet. So, all right, so I get off the phone and I go and I try to update because I haven't gone anywhere in 21 years. So I go in here and I try to update this vita, and then the dean calls me into a meeting. I don't have time to do this. I'm just going, here you go. I sent it. I was like, this is what it is. It is what it is, whatever. And I don't even, not even 2 days later, they're calling me up. And they come for this interview. So I go for this interview. And I am, first of all, I have never in my life flown Cincinnati to Detroit. That is about 5 minutes in the air. It might take more time to get up and come down than it does at the actual time in the air. And then, you know, Detroit, you know, it's in this new renaissance. So this airport is beautiful. And I'm amazed because I get to walk, you know, from the gate. I walk down a couple gates and I walk into the Western Hotel. Just like right there. It's right, like I'm just. And so I go to this, you know, whatever airport interview. They set up in the hotel, long table, all these people asking me all these questions, and I'm just, you know, answering them, whatever. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not piece from the D to the rest. So I say, so it's the last conversation we're in, and I got to clear this day. I was like, this is my job. This is my job. Right? Like, there is trauma. There is challenge. There is so much possibility and potential. There is opportunity to create a college whose core philosophy is about radical neighborhoods, right? I see it in that last conversation. I don't even know what they said, but I just got that shot of like, this is your job. Not, which scared me, because you know what? I mean, I had to go back home and tell people. My husband, who's a Louisiana boy, who's constantly said, we are not moving 1 inch further north. I had to go back and tell. My daughter was a freshman in high school, right? High school is traumatic all by itself. Never mind moving in the middle of it. And for whatever reason, they got on, they were like, okay, my daughter, oh, this is the beautiful thing. You inspire young people and they turn around and inspire you right back. Like, oh my gosh. She was like, let's go do it, Mom. It's an adventure. Right. This might have had something to do with the fact too that she chose to go to high school at all girls Catholic school. She's a volleyball player. They're at the top of the volleyball group chain, but I was trying to explain to her, this is not just Christian, this is Catholic. Right? And this means something specific. And she was like, at school, Mom. But every day she's coming home with what is happening? And she got into it with the religion teacher about representation of women in the Bible. About the representation of women in the Bible. And then she came home one day mad because they had a pro-life display in the hallway and they wouldn't let them have pro-choice. I was like, girl, it's Catholic. Some things that you just, you kind of give over to. So this might have been a little freedom for her as well. And so she's gone from that to Detroit Public schools. But, in stepping into this role, I feel like people are worried about, I'm stepping into this role as who I am and as who I've become. And it will, either we're gonna get it or I'm there for some other reason, right? That I don't know yet, but it's coming back home in a city that also carries lots of trauma for me. My brother, my family has been tortured by the gun violence in Detroit. My brother was killed by gun violence. My cousin, my brother Sekou, my cousin Giaco, my cousin Cam is paralyzed for life. And then 1 week after arriving home, my cousin Khalil, on his way to college, was shot down in a drive-by, right? So it carries lots of trauma for me, right? Violence, lots of violence, right? But what does it mean to sort of take up the challenge? And I'm telling people, this is the biggest sacrifice I have made in my life, to step into a dean position where where it's not just about saying whatever I want to say now. It's about being strategic about that and understanding that this is about making a way for us to do the work that we need to do, right? It's a huge sacrifice in so many ways to walk into a college and say, we're not going to do this the regular old way. Right? Like, we're going to embrace this idea of radical neighborliness. And what I'm saying, and love, I had to apologize to my faculty because I was trying to convey to them a moment of urgency, like we need to move now. But what they heard was fear. So I had to back it up. These are the decisions making every day. I had to back it up and apologize to the entire faculty and staff and saying that was not my intention. I do not operate out of fear, only out of love. And so let me try again. And when we try to get to the essence of this, what is this radical neighborliness? I'm telling you, it's the way in which we decide conscientiously to build solidarity with the communities that are being left out, left behind, and underserved in this quickly changing city that is still 77% African American. And so that looks like the hard work and hard decisions we have to make every day. And some things we have to leave on the table, and some things we have to pick up. And every day I have to get up and check myself. Right? I have to get up and I have to say, what violence can I undo today? What love can I extend today? How do I help a whole community of faculty and staff and partners shift the way we think about what's possible in our world making, and how to center love in those practices, right? So I tell my friends, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me, because we gonna get it or I'm gonna be gone. Right? On to whatever the next piece of the struggle and the journey is. And I can't underscore to you enough how much of a sacrifice it is, because what it does is it puts me a step away from the intimate work that I like to be doing with students and with community. Right now, I'm trying to get into a bigger picture and trying to steal back from the university what has been taken and bring it back to the people, right? And so this struggle is real, and this stuff will keep happening. You know, that's the other lesson. Like, again, I love, y'all know, Grace Lee Boggs fan, that the transformation is in the heart of the struggle. It's not at the end of the struggle, right? It's one struggle, you evolve to one point, you gotta pick up and you gotta keep going, because that's how we're growing, right? That's how we're becoming. And if we're more conscientious of that, we can be coming in ways that are actually making the world a better place. Not because we relied on the institution to do it, but because we did our work. And we find ways to do our work, even when the institution is failing us. The work must go on. The community was the first place, right? And now we've almost forgotten about that. Like, that's the first place. So this is the work of cultivating. And if you know, again, I'm just dropping a little Black culture on y'all. Love, peace, and soul comes from what? Soul Train. Soul Train, right? Okay, there you go. Just love, peace, and soul. Exactly. And what I think we can't have peace, we can't have nonviolence until we embrace the love. And sometimes you gotta feel it. You gotta feel your way through it. We can't always be doing what we like to do as academics and just try to dissect it, take it apart, so we can then pass it out or control it. Sometimes you gotta surrender and be in it and feel your way through it, right? So that is what I'm wishing as we, continue the rest of this conference and all of this sort of brilliance, that we can embody it, be in it. Talking about it is important. Writing about it is important. But challenging ourselves every day to be in it is how it will make the impact that we need to make. So thank you.